So now we're going to discuss the semantic evaluation rules for the allocation of a new object. So for an object-oriented language such as ours, which we are assuming to be a C++ like language, you can declare a new type using this keyword class, and let's say you say class T, and then maybe it derives from some other classes. So that's you can specify the base classes in these dots, and then you say you have some attributes A1, A2, AN of this class T. Now some of these attributes could be defined in this class definition, but some of these attributes could be coming from, let's say, the base classes. All right, and maybe the syntax for C++ to initialize base classes is different, but essentially what it means is that when you allocate a new object of type T, then this is called a constructor, and so the constructor gets called, and when the constructor gets called, then each of the attributes need to get initialized. And maybe the programmer intends them to be initialized in this way. So to initialize A1, you need to execute the expression E1, and whatever is the value that is returned by E1 is the value that goes for A1. And similarly, E2 for A2 and EN for AN. Now, so that's the idea of that's the syntax of a declaration of a class and its constructor, and how its attributes may be initialized. And then maybe there is some more body, but just for simplicity, I'm assuming that there is no extra body of the constructor, so it's just the attribute initialization expressions. And then if you want to allocate a new object of this class, you could use this keyword called new, and so new T is going to return an object of class T. Now once again, I'm not strictly conforming to the C++ standard, and I'm not supporting all features of C++ or anything like that. I'm just defining my own toy language and syntax which resembles a modern object-oriented language. Okay, so now the question is, how should I specify the evaluation rules for new T? Notice that new T not only involves allocation of a new object, but also the execution of the constructor logic, which includes execution of E1, E2, EN, and so on, and then setting the attribute values A1 ... accordingly. Now, before we can even talk about allocating an object, the question is, what is an object in this case? An object, class T, is just a collection of attributes. Right? I mean, of course, when we talk about actual code generation, we may decide to represent an object as a contiguous array of these attributes, like when we talked about code generation for objects in one of our modules. But at the abstract level, we really don't care how they are laid out. What we care about is that the attribute A1 has a location, attribute A2 is mapped to another location, and so on. And what is this whole entire class T object? It is just a collection of these locations. All right. Okay, so let's start. So informal semantics of such an allocation instruction using the new keyword are: you first allocate locations to hold all the attributes of an object of class T using new lock, for example. So we have already been introduced to this operator called new lock when we were discussing in a previous module, and so we can use the same new lock operator to basically allocate new locations in the store. All right, and we need to map A1 to the appropriate location and so on. And so just allocating the locations for each of the attributes is equivalent to allocating a new object. So there's no other space that is required to allocate the object, right? The object is just a sum of the parts, which is each of the attributes. So if I just allocate each of the attributes using new lock, I pretty much allocated the object, right? And so we will represent the newly allocated object using this syntax, which is a T brackets, and then A1 is mapped to L1, A2 is mapped to L2, where L1 and L2 are locations in the store, and AN is mapped to LN. And so this whole thing can be called a value or an object of class T. All right, so that's how we're going to represent a newly allocated object, or any object for that matter, of class T. Okay, and notice that this representation is leaving things as abstract as possible. For example, it doesn't say whether L1 needs to be, what is the relative locations of L1 and L2. They can be far apart. We also don't say how they are stringed together, how do I reach them, and things like that. So all those things are kind of not specified here. because we want to leave things abstract. But we have already seen a code generation strategy of how things may be done in practice in reality. But here we are just leaving things as abstract as possible. Then we set attributes to the default value. So before we actually initialize E1, E2, and so on, we need to basically say we need to initialize the store. We say we have allocated these locations, but while we are allocating locations, we haven't really given them any values. With values will be computed by evaluating these expressions, these initializer expressions E1, E2, and so on. And so before we can even do the initialization, we need to assign some value to A1, A2, right? Recall that when we talked about declarations, the rule that we had used was an initialized declaration. But what if it was an uninitialized declaration? So in our language, we are going to assume that there are default values for every type. So for example, 0 may be the default value for integer, all right? Or if you want to leave things more unspecified, you could say an uninitialized value is the default value for, let's say, an integer or something like that. So every type should have a default value, and uninitialized value is also a valid default value, but it should, there should be some way of representing what the value is. So maybe it's an uninitialized value, maybe it's 0, maybe it's an empty string for the string type, and so on, right? So whatever it is, there needs to be a default value for every type. And so we need that, and we will, before we actually execute the constructor initializers like E1, E2, En, we will first set the attributes to the default values. And this is important, okay, as we're going to see, because after all, in what context does E1 execute? E1 executes in a context where A1 has already been allocated and A2 also has been allocated. And so if E1 ever kind of tries to access A2, then what value should it see? We can't just say that it can. So we need to give it some value. That value may be an uninitialized value. That's fine, but we need to have some notion of a default value for every type. Okay, so we're going to have a default value for every type, and then we are going to evaluate the initializers and set the resulting attribute values. For example, we're going to evaluate E1, and then whatever is the resulting value, we are going to set A1 to that value, and so on. Okay. But the question is, when I'm evaluating E1, what should be my environment, variable environment E, and what should be my store S, okay? And so those are the kind of questions that are going to be answered by our formal evaluation rules, as we've been doing so far as well. And finally, after we have done all the initialization, we just return the newly allocated object in this form, which is, it's just a collection of attributes, and each attribute has been mapped to a location L1.ln. And these locations have been in turn allocated or created using the new lock operator. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, so before we begin, let's just define some notation. So let's say that for an attribute AI, so T is the type of the class that we are, whose object we are allocating. Then that class has attributes A1.an, and for every attribute AI, let's say Ti is its type, all right? And then let DTI be the default value for type TI, okay? And TI could also be another class or something like that, and even then it should have a default value, which is going to be formed by actually calling the constructor of that particular class, and so on. And then EI is the initializer for AI, and this is something that we've already seen in the previous syntax. Okay, so DTI is the default value for TI, TI is the type of AI, and then EI is the initializer that gets called at the time of object creation. Okay. Also, the order of initialization matters. Should I call E1 first or should I call E2 first? All right. Does it matter? Well, it matters because the evaluation of E1 can have some side effects, and so it may update the store. And so, if E1 is called before E2, the final store value may be different from if E2 is evaluated before E1, and so the order matters. And so we are going to assume, somewhat similarly to what C++ and other object-oriented languages also assume, that the attributes are listed and kind of evaluated in greatest ancestor first order, which means the base class attributes are evaluated before the derived class attributes always, all right? And so, yeah, that's what it means. Greater ancestor first in the type hierarchy. And so the base class attributes appear before derived class attributes in this order, A1.an. And that's the order which we are going to also use for our evaluation purposes as well in our evaluation rule. Okay, so now we are ready to start developing our evaluation rule for the allocation statement new t. And once again, just like everything else, we have a context which is characterized by the current object S0. So maybe new t is appearing in the context of some default object or some current object, right? So that's S0. E is the current variable environment under where this new t was called, and S is the current value of the store. And store is just mapping locations to values. And I want to know what is the value that new t should return, and how would it update my store. Okay, so the first thing here is that just like our informal semantics, we are going to say that we're going to first allocate n locations for the n attributes. So I'm going to say L1 equals new loc s, L2 equals new loc s, and I'm just using this notation, says L2 equals new loc s union L1, which means L2 should be different from any already mapped location in S, and it should also be different from L1, all right? And similarly, Ln is just new loc of S union L1 union L2, all right? I could have used some different notation as well. For example, I would have just allocated all the locations in one go using a new loc, a group new loc operator or something like that. But basically the idea is that all these locations L1 L2 Ln should be new. They should not have been previously allocated in the store. They should be distinct from the locations already present in the store, and they should be mutually distinct as well. Okay, so now that we have allocated the locations, what's the next step? Well, the next step is that we want to set the default values for the respective types for these locations in the store. So, so before I do that, let's represent the value. So V is now simply formed by stringing together all these locations. So just say A1 is just L1, A2 is L2, AN is LN. I've already allocated them. And so that's the value when I string them together with the T operator, which is T represents the type of the class, the type basically. And so this is the value that will get returned, right? So you will see that this is the value that comes here because this is the new object that has been created. Okay, all right, so that's the new object, but I can't just return it straight away, right? So I need to initialize it, and I need to do something with it. And so as I said before, I'm going to first set the default values for these locations L1.ln. And so that's this this particular component of the rule, which says S1 equals S updated such that A1 gets, this should have been actually L1. So L1 gets DT1, L2 gets DT2, and Ln gets DTn. Okay, so just update the store such that we map L1 to DT1, L2 to DT2, Ln to DTn. Recall D1, DT1, DT2, and DTn are the default values for the types T1.tn, which are the types of the attributes. And we represent the new updated store as S1. Okay, what's the next step? We want to evaluate the initializers E1.en. But what should be the store in which I evaluate this initializers, and what should be the environment, variable environment in which I evaluate the initializers, and what should be the current object S0 under which I should evaluate these initializers, all right? So the answer to that is the store should probably be something derived from S1 or something derived from S1. The environment E under which E1, E2, En are evaluated should be completely different from this environment E under which the new T is being evaluated, because we are using static scoping, and in static scoping the environment, variable environment that should be active is the variable environment at the location, at the static location, the static scope of the definition of E1, E2 and En. And so, the first thing I want to do is define a new variable environment, and the only mappings in this new variable environment E prime are A1 maps to L1, A2 maps to L2, and An maps to Ln. So I completely notice that E prime is completely independent of E, all right, which was the environment at the location at which new T was called. And this is coming from our static scoping semantics, or static scoping nature of our programming language. Okay, and now we are ready to evaluate E1 and E2, En, and we already said that we're going to evaluate it in the order of greatest ancestor first. We're going to first evaluate E1, then E2, and so on till En. And in what environment will I evaluate it? I will evaluate it in E prime. What is the store I will evaluate it in? I will evaluate it in S1. What is the current object in which I will evaluate it in? I cannot evaluate it in the current object S0, because now this has to be evaluated because if these initializers use the this keyword, what should this refer to? This should refer to the newly created object, not the object at which the new t was called. And so this is the final rule. I'd say v, which is the newly created object, which was allocated. This becomes the new S0 in which E1, E2 and En will get evaluated. E prime is the environment that we have already discussed, under which this will get evaluated, and S1 is the updated store which has the default values of A1. And what do we evaluate? We want to evaluate E1, E2, E3 in sequence, and as we are evaluating them, we also want to keep assigning, so that if E2 refers to A1, then it should see the updated value. And so the one way to represent that is that we just create an expression formed using semicolons and the scope operator and the curly braces, and say A1 colon equal to E1 semicolon, A2 colon equal to E2 semicolon dot dot dot, AN equals EN. All right. So this forms my expression. And notice that semicolon is a sequencing operator. So first A1 is going equal to E1 will get evaluated, and then A2 equals E2 is going to evaluate it, and so on. And we evaluate this whole expression under S1. So whatever are the side effects of A1 equals E1 will get will be available, will be the context, will form the part of the context for A2 equals E2, and so on. And let's say this whole expression now evaluates to Vn comma S2. So it evaluates some value and some S2. So I'm going to, what is Vn? Vn is just representing the value computed by An equals En, and I really don't care about that. But I care about S2. How has it updated the store, right? Those are the side effects of doing this allocation. And so finally, I'm going to say new t gives me V comma S2. So V is the value which is representing the entire object, which is formed by stringing together all these locations L1.ln, and then S2 is the updated store, which involves all the side effects of actually first doing the default value settings and then actually calling the initializers in order. Okay, so that's the complete rule for new, which is the allocation statement in our C++ like language. And notice that the first couple of rules here, which is new lock and saying what is V, is basically just about allocation of the object. The next three rules here, are basically initializing the object. So I've circled two, but maybe even this one. The S1 equals S dt1 for A1, L1, and so on. By the way, this should be L1, right? I already made this correction in a previous slide. Let me just make it here as well. So the initialization will be through all these three statements. And the important things to note here is, let me just fix this as well. Okay, and the important thing is what is the context under which we initialize the attributes, or under which we call the initializer expressions. It is V, E prime, S1, and all these three are very interesting to see. These are actually quite different from S0, E, S. All these three components are different, and so it also gives you some idea of how context is being used to represent these rules and to represent the semantics of the language. And finally, look at the body of the initialization, which is also interesting. I've just kind of used a trick here to use the semicolon operator to basically show sequencing, and then I can just evaluate treat this whole thing as one expression, and then say whatever is the value that this expression evaluates to, that's the I'm going to use the store from that expression to represent the store of my final allocation.